Good evening. Tonight, a case that has ignited outrage across the country, raising serious questions about justice, immigration policy, and sentencing laws. A migrant driver, described in court as drug-impaired and speeding at 96 miles per hour, has been released after serving less than 3 years in prison for a crash that killed 3 members of the same family: a mother, her partner, and her teenage daughter. Many are now asking, is this justice, or has the system failed? This is a story of loss, anger, and a growing political storm. Segment 1. The tragic night. The crash happened on a quiet evening that was meant to be ordinary. A family driving home together. A mother behind the wheel, her partner in the passenger seat, and her young daughter in the back. Within seconds, their lives were ended. According to court documents, the driver responsible was traveling at 96 miles per hour, nearly twice the speed limit. Investigators later confirmed he had drugs in his system at the time of the crash. Witnesses described the impact as catastrophic. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, but the damage was devastating. 3 lives were gone. A family erased in moments. In court, prosecutors detailed a series of reckless decisions. The driver had reportedly consumed drugs before getting behind the wheel. Toxicology reports confirmed impairment. Speed data recovered from the vehicle showed he was driving at 96 miles per hour in a restricted zone. The prosecution argued that the crash was entirely avoidable, the result of dangerous, irresponsible behavior. During sentencing, the judge described the incident as a tragedy of immense proportions. Yet, despite the severity of the case, the sentence handed down was significantly lower than many expected. After time served and early release provisions, the driver spent less than 3 years in custody. Relatives of the victims were present in court. They spoke of birthdays that will never be celebrated again, holidays that will now be marked by silence. One family member said outside the courtroom, "We got a life sentence, he got 3 years." The grief is compounded by anger. They believe the punishment does not reflect the scale of the loss. They argue that dangerous driving combined with drug impairment should carry far harsher consequences. The case has now entered the political arena. Critics have accused the government of being soft on crime, particularly in cases involving migrant offenders. Some opposition figures have called the early release a get-out-of-jail-free card, arguing that sentencing guidelines must be urgently reviewed. Government representatives, however, say sentencing decisions are made independently by the courts, not politicians, and are based on existing legal frameworks. They stress that judges must follow established sentencing laws. Still, public anger continues to grow. Under current law, sentences for causing death by dangerous driving vary depending on circumstances, prior record, and level of culpability. Good behavior credits and automatic early release rules can reduce the actual time served. Legal experts say this case falls within current statutory limits. But many members of the public are asking whether those limits are too lenient. Should causing multiple deaths while under the influence result in mandatory longer sentences? That debate is now intensifying. This case has also reopened discussion about drug-impaired driving enforcement, deportation policies following serious convictions, early release rules for violent offenses, and whether victims' families have enough voice in sentencing. Some campaigners are now calling for minimum mandatory sentences for fatal drug driving cases, stricter immigration consequences for serious criminal convictions, reform of automatic early release provisions. The government has said it is reviewing sentencing policies more broadly, though no immediate changes have been announced. In the community where the victims lived, tributes still remain. Flowers, photographs, messages written by classmates and neighbors. The daughter, described by teachers as bright and full of promise, had dreams of university. Her mother was known as devoted and kind. Her stepfather, supportive and hardworking. Friends say the loss has left a permanent scar. Experts remind us that cases like this leave behind more than statistics. They leave trauma, Survivors often struggle with grief, anxiety, long-term psychological impact, financial instability. For families, justice is not just about punishment. It is about acknowledgement, recognition, and accountability. The question now is whether this case will lead to legal reform. Opposition leaders are calling for a review of sentencing guidelines. Campaign groups are demanding stricter standards, and the victim's family says they will continue pushing for change, so no other family endures what they have. Closing. 3 lives ended in seconds. A driver speeding at 96 miles per hour. Drugs in his system. Less than 3 years served. Tonight, a grieving family says justice was not done, and the nation is once again asking whether the law truly reflects the value of a life. Opening headlines. Tonight, outrage after a migrant driver responsible for a fatal high-speed crash that killed 3 members of one family is released after serving less than 3 years in prison. The collision, caused by a drug-impaired driver traveling at 96 miles per hour, has reignited debate over sentencing laws, early release rules, and political accountability. This is not just a court case. It has become a national controversy. Part 1. A case that shocked the country. This tragedy did not unfold in chaos. It unfolded in normality. A family driving together. A routine journey, no warning, no anticipation of danger. Then, in a matter of seconds, their vehicle was struck with devastating force. Police later confirmed the other driver was traveling at 96 miles per hour, significantly above the legal speed limit. Toxicology reports presented in court showed the driver had drugs in his system at the time of the crash. The impact killed 3 people instantly: a mother, her partner, and her teenage daughter. Emergency responders described the scene as one of the most severe they had attended. Part 2. The investigation. Crash investigators reconstructed the collision using vehicle data, CCTV footage, and forensic analysis. Their findings painted a disturbing picture: excessive speed, drug impairment, failure to brake before impact. Prosecutors argued the deaths were the direct result of reckless decisions made before the engine was even started. They described the defendant's behavior as a complete disregard for public safety. There was no evidence of mechanical failure, no evidence of road hazards. The crash, prosecutors said, was entirely preventable. Part 3. The sentencing. In court, the judge acknowledged the magnitude of the loss. The court heard emotional victim impact statements from relatives who described their grief as permanent and unbearable. Yet, under existing sentencing guidelines, the driver received a fixed prison term. With time served and automatic early release provisions applied, the total time in custody amounted to less than 3 years. The courtroom reaction was immediate. Family members reportedly broke down in tears. Outside the courthouse, anger erupted. Part 4. Why less than 3 years? Under current legal frameworks, inmates in many cases are eligible for release after serving a portion of their sentence, provided there is no significant misconduct. Legal analysts explain that early release is not uncommon, even in serious cases, due to structured sentencing laws. However, the public response suggests many were unaware how those rules function in practice. The phrase "get out of jail free card" began circulating on social media within hours. Part 5. Political dimensions. The controversy has quickly moved beyond the courtroom. Opposition figures argued that the case reflects systemic leniency in serious driving offenses. They claim sentencing reforms are urgently needed. Government officials have responded by stating that courts operate independently and sentencing decisions are guided by legislation passed by Parliament. They insist political leaders do not determine individual case outcomes. But critics argue lawmakers shape the framework and therefore share responsibility. The debate has intensified across political lines. Part 6. Immigration status and deportation questions. Another aspect fueling debate is the offender's immigration status. Campaigners are asking, should non-citizens convicted of serious crimes face automatic deportation? Legal experts note that deportation decisions depend on multiple factors, including human rights considerations, appeal rights, and the length of sentence imposed. In this case, questions remain about what further action, if any, will be taken regarding residency status. The government has not yet confirmed additional measures. Part 7. Community grief. In the victim's hometown, silence has replaced what was once an ordinary family presence. Neighbors describe them as close-knit and active in the community. At a small memorial site near the crash location, candles continue to burn. Friends say the teenage daughter had plans for higher education. Her mother was described as protective and devoted. Her stepfather, hardworking and dependable. 3 chairs now empty at family gatherings. Part 8. The broader issue of drug driving. According to road safety advocates, drug-impaired driving remains an increasing concern. Experts warn that public awareness often focuses heavily on alcohol. While drug impairment can be equally dangerous, they are calling for stronger roadside testing, tougher minimum sentences, public education campaigns, greater judicial consistency. This case has become a focal point for that argument. Part 9. Victims' rights advocacy. Victims' rights groups say families often feel sidelined once sentencing concludes. They argue the justice system prioritizes procedural fairness, but sometimes fails to reflect emotional harm. Some are pushing for mandatory minimum sentences for fatal dangerous driving, restrictions on automatic early release, expanded victim consultation rights. Petitions demanding reform have already gathered thousands of signatures. Part 10. What happens next? Will this case change the law? There is increasing pressure for Parliament to review sentencing structures for causing death by dangerous driving, particularly when drugs are involved. Legal scholars say reform is possible, but it requires legislative action. For now, the sentence stands. The release has happened. The debate continues. Closing statement. 3 lives ended in one violent moment. A driver speeding at 96 miles per hour. Drugs in his system. Less than 3 years served. For one family, the consequences are permanent. For lawmakers, the questions are growing louder. Is the balance between justice and law working as intended? Or does this case signal a system in need of reform? This story is far from over. We will continue to monitor developments. Good night. If you would like, I can now provide